What happens when the world is washed clean, but sin still hides in the hearts of men? What happens when a moment of shame births a curse that echoes for generations? The ark rests quietly on the slopes of Ararat. The clouds have withdrawn. The rainbow still hangs faintly in the sky, a promise between God and man. Humanity has begun again, and at its heart stands one man, Noah, the righteous survivor of a world that drowned. He steps upon the new soil, barefoot and humbled, his sons beside him, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, each carrying the seed of nations yet unborn. The air is still, the land unclaimed, and the memory of destruction hovers like smoke over a silent dawn. But peace is fragile, and even in the new beginning, a shadow waits to be awakened, a single act that will carve a scar into generations. They thought the flood had washed away the curse of sin, but sin had learned to swim, the curse of Canaan, the forgotten son of Ham. The flood was over. The earth, once drowned in judgment, now breathed again. Rivers sparkled under newborn sunlight. Trees stretched upward, reborn from the roots of the old world. And Noah, the man chosen by God to carry the seed of humanity through the storm, walked upon soil that had never felt a human footprint since the waters fell. He was no longer the builder of an ark. He was the planter of hope. In his hands he held seeds, small, fragile, but full of promise. Each seed was a declaration that life would go on. Among them were the vines, tender and green, which he pressed into the ground with reverence. This, he whispered to his sons, shall be a vineyard, a sign that joy will return to the earth. The days turned into months. The vines took root, curling their green fingers around wooden stakes, drinking deeply of the soil that God himself had renewed. Noah watched them grow, and in their leaves he saw redemption. He saw laughter where once there had been screams. He saw peace where once there had been judgment. For the first time since the flood, Noah smiled without fear. The vineyard became his sanctuary, a place where he could forget the cries of those who had been swept away, and the sound of rain that once battered the ark like the drums of war. But even in the peace of Eden restored, temptation whispered. The fruit of the vine, sweet, fragrant, glistening in the sun, became Noah's comfort. He pressed it, he drank of it, and for a moment the taste was paradise. But paradise once lost is not easily reclaimed. For where wine flows without restraint, reason fades, and with it the wall between honor and shame. As the sun set over the hills, Noah, the righteous man who had walked with God, stumbled into the shadows of his tent, unaware that what would happen next would change the destiny of his bloodline forever. Inside, the old man rests, weary from his labor, warmed by the fruit of his vineyard. The wine he had pressed in joy now courses through his veins like a quiet fire. The cup that once symbolized blessing now becomes the vessel of weakness. He drinks again and again, until the world begins to sway like the waves that once carried his ark. His hand trembles. The cup slips, spilling red wine across the earth, the color of blood upon the soil of new creation. Noah stumbles to his bed, unaware that his robe has fallen away. He lies uncovered, his body exposed, his dignity forgotten. The man who once commanded the animals of the ark, who stood blameless before God, now lies fallen beneath the weight of his own humanity. Outside the tent, the night is still. The stars watch in silence. And then, footsteps. Ham approaches. The son who once helped build the ark now walks toward his father's tent, drawn by the flicker of a lamp. He pushes aside the flap, and there in the dim light he sees it. His father, the great Noah, lying bare, helpless, stripped of his strength. For a heartbeat, the air stands still. Ham's eyes narrow. Instead of covering the shame, he lets a crooked smile creep across his face. A seed of mockery takes root where honor should have grown. He turns away, not in sorrow but in amusement. The moment becomes a choice, and the choice becomes a curse. Outside, he calls out to his brothers, his voice laced with scorn. "Come, see our father. The great man who survived the flood lies uncovered." But Shem and Japheth do not laugh. Their hearts tremble. They look at one another, and in their silence they understand something sacred. There are moments in life when laughter is sin, and respect is the only language heaven hears. They take a garment, place it upon their shoulders, and walk backward into the tent, faces turned away, eyes closed in reverence. Their steps are slow, holy. They cover their father, restoring the dignity their brother had stripped away. As the garment settles upon Noah's body, a soft wind moves through the tent, as if heaven itself sighs in relief. But sin, once awakened, does not sleep again. The night had witnessed something irreversible, an act that would echo through generations. Ham walks outside, his heart light but his spirit stained. His laughter still lingers in the air like smoke, thin, poisonous, unseen. He looks up at the stars, unaware that heaven is listening. Every word he spoke, every careless whisper, had already reached the ears of God. Shem and Japheth sit silently near the fire, faces heavy with sorrow. The flames flicker in their eyes as they think of what their brother has done. Shem softly, he mocked our father. Japheth, and in mocking him, he mocked the God who chose him. Their silence is reverence. Their quiet is prayer. For they know the difference between laughter and judgment, between jest and sin. But Ham feels no remorse. He sharpens his tongue with pride, unaware that a curse sharpens its edge for him in return. Inside the tent, Noah begins to stir. His breath is slow, his head heavy from the wine. The light of morning crawls through the cracks of the canvas, spilling over him like the first light after the flood. He groans and sits up, holding his head. The scent of spilled wine and the cold touch of a blanket over his body confuse him. Then he feels it, the garment, the covering, not his own. A tremor passes through him. Memory begins to return like a storm. The laughter of his son, faint but cruel, echoes in his mind. He calls out, "Shem, Japheth, where is Ham?" They step inside, heads bowed. Their eyes do not meet his. "Father," Shem says gently, "you were uncovered. We have covered you." The words hang heavy between them. The silence that follows is thicker than air. And in that silence Noah understands. He sees more than a moment. He sees a spirit that mocks what should be honored, a spirit that laughs where tears should fall, a spirit that plants dishonor where reverence should live. He rises slowly, leaning on his staff. The same man who once spoke blessings at the dawn of the new world now prepares to speak a word that will shape the fate of nations. The whisper of dishonor had reached him, and from his mouth a storm would soon answer. Noah stands tall, his age showing, yet his presence commanding. His eyes, though weary, gleam with the fire of divine discernment. The silence around him feels holy, heavy, eternal. Ham stands before him, his face uncertain, his heart blind to what he has awakened. Shem and Japheth stand behind, silent, solemn, the sons of reverence watching the son of mockery. "What have you done, my son?" Ham shifts uncomfortably, forcing a laugh. "Father, I only looked. I meant no harm." Noah's gaze pierces through him, deeper than words, deeper than excuses. He sees the pride, the dishonor, the spirit of irreverence that had taken root. Then Noah looks beyond Ham, into the unseen generations that would rise from his line. He sees a vision of cities and nations, bright at first, but soon darkened by idolatry, lust and pride. He sees altars built not for God, but for gods of stone and fire. He sees a people who mock the holy, just as Ham mocked his father. The old prophet lowers his head, a tear trembling on his cheek. When he lifts his face again, his voice no longer belongs only to him, it carries the weight of heaven. Cursed be Canaan! His voice thunders, echoing through the valley. The lowest of slaves shall he be to his brothers. The air shifts, the wind stops, even the birds fall silent. Ham's smile fades, his hands tremble. He doesn't understand. Canaan his son? Why his child and not him? But Noah continues, his tone changing, moving from judgment to blessing. Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem. May Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth. May he dwell in the tents of Shem. And may Canaan be his slave. Each word falls like a hammer on stone, shaping destiny, drawing invisible borders across the earth. In that moment, the world is divided not just by rivers and mountains, but by honor and dishonor. Shem's line would rise with blessing, a path that would one day lead to Abraham, to David, to the Messiah. Japheth's line would spread wide, filling nations with power and growth. But Ham's line through Canaan would carry a mark, not of skin or color, but of spiritual rebellion. The curse was not about the man's body, but about his heart, not about geography, but about honor. One act, Noah whispers, one choice, and the earth remembers forever. The days after Noah's words were strange. The sun still rose, the rivers still ran, the earth still bore fruit, but within Noah's household the air was colder. Ham no longer laughed. He worked the soil in silence, haunted by words that would not fade. Cursed be Canaan. At night he would sit outside his tent, watching his sons sleep, young, innocent, unaware of the shadow that now followed him. Sometimes Ham whispered into the wind, as if trying to bargain with fate. Father's anger will fade, surely God will forgive. But destiny had already begun its slow march. What was spoken by a righteous man carried weight beyond time. Canaan grew, strong, sharp-eyed, bold like his father. But in his heart, a quiet restlessness stirred, a defiance that mirrored the very moment his grandfather had cursed him. He built cities, he gathered people, and in time his descendants filled the valleys and coastlands. From Canaan came the Sidonians, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Jebusites, names that would one day shake the earth and defy the children of Israel. Generations later, when Israel, the line of Shem, would enter the land, they would find Canaan's sons already there, mighty, proud, unrepentant. And just as Noah had spoken, the children of Ham would bow before the descendants of Shem. The curse was not immediate. It unfolded like a shadow at sunset, slow, silent, inevitable. A spiritual chain, not forged by God's cruelty, but by man's choices. He watches his grandsons play in the distance, Canaan among them. For a moment he almost smiles, but then his gaze darkens, as if seeing beyond time. He sees cities that will rise and fall. He sees battles fought over faith and pride. He sees nations blessed and others broken. He sees the price of dishonor paid again and again. Noah closes his eyes, whispering softly, "O Lord, let them learn. Let them learn before the end." The wind answers with silence. The words of Noah echo faintly. The lowest of slaves shall he be to his brothers. But in heaven's eyes it is not about servitude of the flesh, it is about the bondage of the soul. Those who mock what is sacred live chained to the pride they worship. Those who honor what is holy walk free, even if they kneel. Generations rose and fell, yet the echo of one night lingered. From Ham came kingdoms of might, Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. But only one bore the mark of shame. For the sin was not in laughter alone, but in forgetting what should never be mocked, the honor of what God calls sacred. Time passed. The tents of Noah's sons became cities. Cities became kingdoms. Kingdoms became nations. And from one family, the earth was peopled again, but not all walked in the same light. Shem's descendants carried a quiet reverence, a remembrance of their father's covering, of that sacred moment when honor triumphed over shame. Through his line came Eber, the ancestor of the Hebrews. Through Eber's line would come Abraham, who would hear the same God that once spoke to Noah and say, "Leave your country, and I will make you a great nation." Shem's bloodline carried faith like a torch, a flame that would survive the ages, burning still through prophets and priests, through kings and shepherds, until one day it would burn in the heart of Christ himself. Shem's reward was not wealth or power, it was legacy, a covenant that would never die. From Japheth, the eldest, came explorers, wanderers, builders, those who journeyed far beyond the valleys. His descendants spread toward the coasts and islands, filling Europe, parts of Asia, and beyond. They were the dreamers and inventors of the earth, the ones who expanded tents and boundaries, fulfilling Noah's blessing. May God enlarge Japheth. Their tents would one day stretch even into the tents of Shem, prophecy fulfilled as the Gentile nations came to know the God of Israel. Where Shem carried the covenant, Japheth carried expansion. Together they formed the ark of redemption that spanned the world. But Ham, his name would forever carry the whisper of rebellion, not because of the color of his skin or the place of his dwelling, but because of the spirit that lingered from that night. His sons were mighty: Cush, Mizraim, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. From them rose powerful empires, and Cush gave birth to the kingdoms of Nubia and Ethiopia, and Mizraim to the wonders of Egypt, pyramids that pierced the heavens, gods carved from stone. Put to warriors of the western lands, and Canaan to cities steeped in splendor and sin. The blood of Ham's children built monuments that defied time, but they also built altars that defied God. They worshipped the sun, the moon, and the flesh. They bowed before idols of gold and fire, forgetting the God who once spared their father from the flood. In the luxury of their greatness, the curse found its quiet fulfillment. Their kingdoms rose high, and then fell, each in turn, under the weight of pride. Cursed be Canaan. It was never about nations alone. It was about the heart. For even among Ham's descendants, God's mercy could still be found, and even among Shem's children, sin still crouched at the door. The curse of one man's dishonor became the mirror of all mankind, a warning that the smallest act of disrespect can echo louder than thunder. From one man came 3 nations. From 3 nations came the story of us all. Cursed be Canaan. That single declaration, spoken in a tent centuries ago, now unfolds across the landscape of time. Canaan's descendants flourished, builders, traders, and warriors. They carved cities into stone and raised towers that glittered in the sun. Sidon, Tyre, Jericho, and Jerusalem before it was holy. Their cities thrived with beauty, but their hearts strayed toward darkness. They forgot the God who gave breath to man after the flood. Instead, they built temples for Baal and Asherah, gods of lust and sacrifice. The descendants of Canaan mocked what was pure, just as Ham once mocked what was sacred. They offered their children to flames, believing fire would bring them favor. They danced under idols, believing wood and stone could hear their cries. And yet, through it all, God waited. He did not strike at once. Mercy always comes before judgment. Centuries later, the descendants of Shem, the Israelites, stood at the borders of the Promised Land. Before them lay the land of Canaan, beautiful, fertile, radiant under the sun, yet corrupted within. God spoke to Joshua, "Be strong and courageous, for I will give into your hand the land I swore to your fathers." The land of Canaan, once cursed by Noah's lips, would now become the inheritance of Shem's line. Prophecy fulfilled, word for word. The sons of Shem would conquer the sons of Ham, not by might alone, but by divine design. For the curse was never about vengeance. It was the unfolding of order, the fruit of choices made long ago. But in heaven's eyes, the story was never meant to end in hatred. The curse of Canaan was not written to divide skin or tribe. It was written to remind every heart that dishonor destroys more than we can see. Ham's sin was not in looking but in laughing. It was in making a mockery of the sacred, turning what was meant to be covered into a spectacle. Every generation since has stood in the same test. Will you cover or expose? Will you protect dignity or parade shame? Will you honor what God has made holy, or laugh as the world burns? Noah's curse was not the final word, for even in judgment, God leaves a door for mercy. Through Shem's line came the Redeemer, the one who broke every curse, the one who covered our shame as Shem and Japheth once covered their fathers. The curse began with nakedness uncovered, but redemption began with nakedness upon a cross, one exposed in shame to cover the world in grace. From one man's dishonor came a curse. From one man's obedience came salvation, and between them stands the story of every soul. The generations of Noah have spread across the earth. Nations rise, kingdoms fall, languages divide, and yet one truth remains eternal, the echo of that ancient night. A father once lay uncovered, a son once laughed, and from a single act of dishonor came a shadow that reached across the centuries. But God never ends the story in darkness. There would come another son, not of Ham, not of Canaan, not even of Noah's seed alone, but the Son of the living God. He too would be exposed, stripped, mocked, and shamed before the world. But where Ham mocked his father's nakedness, Christ bore the nakedness of all mankind. Where shame once ruled, grace now reigns. Where a curse was spoken, redemption now speaks louder. Every generation faces the same choice Ham faced: to mock or to honor, to expose or to cover, to destroy with words or to protect with love. Noah's story was never only about a vineyard or a curse. It was about the weight of honor, the unseen foundation upon which families, nations, and destinies stand. Honor restores what mockery breaks. Honor builds what pride destroys. Honor covers what shame exposes. When you honor what God calls sacred, your parents, your leaders, your faith, your body, heaven itself remembers your name. Noah's eyes are seen once more, old, tearful, looking upon that rainbow, whispering a final prayer before his time fades. Lord, let them remember. Let them choose honor over pride. Let them not forget you, as I once forgot myself. The rainbow glows brighter. The music crescendos, violins, drums, a soft choir lifting the sound toward heaven. The narrator closes. From the ark came a covenant. From the vineyard came a curse. But from the cross came a covering that broke every curse forever. The curse of Canaan ends where grace begins. And God remembered Noah, and he remembers you,